Okay, now this video is going to show you how, once you've drilled your hole, and I know you've seen that done previously, we then put our little ring on and how we close that ring up, but then also how we complete our cord, which is obviously what we're going to be hanging it from. So having got this thing beautifully polished, okay, certainly on one side, we need to be careful that we don't scratch it as we put it in the vise. And I'm going to be using this metalwork vise, but I'm deliberately leaving the jaws of this open. I'm going to take my little ring, open it up slightly to loop it on, and then bend it closed again. Now we need to put a permanent closure on that, so I'm going to be using some tin solder. Okay, so you can see how I've left the jaws of the vise nice and loose, and I've got the open end of my ring facing upwards. That's the thing that I'm going to want to come to with a soldering iron. Got my soldering iron here, which is nice and hot. Obviously important to remember that everything below the yellow handle is exceptionally hot, so we hold it on the yellow handle and we wouldn't think about touching anything else. We're going to position our soldering iron with some solder melted on it underneath of that gap, and then we're going to introduce more solder, and then we're going to take it away. Now that's closed that up, okay? You can't just put some solder on here and then try and paste it on. It's important that you heat and add the solder at the same time. Right, having closed up our loop, we can then think about finishing the cord off. Now the cord is going to be passed through our loop like that, and it's going to be held together at the top ends with magnets. Now this end already has a magnet on it, and you'll see how this is perfectly bound looking. Yeah? So we're going to do the same with this end here and this magnet. Now the other half of the magnet connects onto there and provides a nice safe link between those 2 points. Okay? The challenge, the first challenge, will come in trying to get this end of the cord through our loop there. Okay? Now, a very important thing to remember, you'll notice that this end was bound. We need to thread on this piece of tubing here called heat shrink tubing before we put this on. That's crucial. You'll only end up having to undo it otherwise. Now, I'm going to be using some PVA glue to stiffen and lubricate the ends of my piece of cord so that it's slightly easier to get it through that very small hole, and lots of you will find this a challenge. Now you'll see I've got a bit of a point on there. Actually, before I started, I cut my cord at 45 degrees so that it had a slight point on it. Now if I take it up to the hole now and I push that through and just twist slightly, should be able to get that through there. Okay, so we've got my loop that I can make now there. Right, now to secure that we're going to be using a needle and thread. Now I've chosen black thread obviously so that it's going to hide it. I'm going to take my needle here which has been threaded up, and I'm going to create a knot in the end using this method where you wrap it around your index finger, push it off so it twists up nicely, and then you grasp it, pull it down. So I've got a decent sized knot on there to secure that. Now you only need to do a couple of stitches here, and actually you will be relieved to note that if your stitching isn't absolutely perfect, that actually it will be covered over with the heat shrink tubing anyway. So I'm going to do 2 or 3 stitches through both those ends. And I'm going to secure that off like that through the loop. Okay, and break that off. Okay, now my stitching's got a bit of a loop in it, which doesn't look very nice. So when I push my heat shrink over the top of it, I'm hoping that all of those things will be hidden. Suddenly it looks considerably neater. Now all that's left to do is obviously to shrink that down using heat. So we're going to be using the soldering iron again, and we're going to rub this end on the barrel of the soldering iron like that, and it's then going to respond to that by shrinking down in size. I'm hoping you can see that on the video. You can see how it's now gripping that. So we're losing all those frayed edges. Right, and that is then complete.